In the bustling city of Florence, Italy, February wrapped the cobblestone streets in a gentle chill. Sophie, 27, stood at the entrance of Trattoria Il Sole, a charming restaurant tucked between ancient buildings. The warm air from inside brushed her face as the door closed behind her, carrying the hum of voices and the clink of glasses. She was alone, far from her small hometown in Colorado, on her first solo trip to Europe. This is what I wanted to see the world, she thought, clutching her scarf. But as she stood there in a new city, in a new country, she felt a wave of uncertainty. No one approached her. No one said, "Table for one?" In the US, a host would have guided her to a seat. Here, it was different. Sophie watched a couple enter, confidently claiming a table by the window. They laughed, their ease making her heart race. Maybe I need to do that, she thought, her hands clammy. She spotted an empty table in the corner, adorned with a single red rose in a small vase, a white tablecloth, and neatly arranged cutlery. Taking a deep breath, she walked over and sat down, her chair scraping softly against the tiled floor. No menu waited on the table. She glanced around. Some diners held menus, others didn't. Do I ask? Do I wait? Her mouth felt dry, her pulse quick. A waiter in a crisp white shirt and black vest passed by, balancing plates and a notebook. He didn't stop. Sophie hesitated, then stayed silent, hoping he'd notice her. Minutes ticked by, each one amplifying her unease. Finally, the waiter returned, his dark eyes kind. "Buonasera," he said. "Have you decided what you'd like?" His English was accented but clear. Sophie's voice wavered. Could I have a menu, please?" He nodded, retrieving a menu from a nearby table. "Here you are," he said, smiling. "Thank you," Sophie whispered, opening the menu. The words were in Italian, with brief English translations below. Her Italian was limited to phrases from a travel app, but she scanned the options, wanting something authentic. Her eyes landed on risotto ai funghi, with a side of insalata mista. Her stomach growled, urging her on. When the waiter returned, Sophie steadied herself. "I'll have the mushroom risotto and a mixed salad, please," she said, her voice shaky but clear. "And to drink?" he asked. "Still water, please," she replied, remembering Italy's preference for con gas or senza gas. The waiter jotted down her order. "Very good. Risotto, salad, and acqua natural, sir?" Sophie nodded. "Yes, thank you." He smiled and walked away. Sophie leaned back, her breath slowing. "I did it. I ordered." The restaurant buzzed with live families chatting, couples sharing wine, an elderly man reading a newspaper. The air smelled of garlic, basil, and warm bread. When her water arrived, she sipped it, the coolness grounding her. Soon, the waiter brought her meal. A steaming plate of creamy risotto, and a vibrant salad with glistening tomatoes. "Buon appetito," he said. Sophie smiled. "Grazie." The risotto was rich, the mushrooms earthy, the salad crisp. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, feeling part of the room's rhythm. When she finished, the waiter asked, "Was it good?" "Very good," Sophie replied, her smile genuine. She paid the bill, adding a small tip, a custom she'd learned wasn't mandatory in Italy but felt right. The waiter gave a slight bow. "Grazie mille." Sophie stood, her legs steady, and walked into the cool night. The streets of Florence glowed with lamplight, and she felt a quiet pride. "I did it. I'm not invisible." Back at her small hotel, Sophie wrote in her journal, "Tonight, I ate alone in a restaurant. I was scared, but I spoke. I'm learning." She'd come to Europe to explore, to push her boundaries, but dining alone had been her biggest fear. In Colorado, she taught high school English, her days filled with lesson plans and students' questions. She loved her job, but her personal life felt stagnant. Past relationships had left her cautious, afraid of trusting again. This trip was her chance to grow, to find herself beyond the classroom. The next morning, Sophie woke to sunlight streaming through her window. Florence's streets bustled with vendors and tourists. Emboldened by her success, she ventured to a small cafe, Caffè della Piazza, its tables spilling onto the sidewalk. No one greeted her, so she chose a table under an awning, the scent of espresso thick in the air. A waitress approached, her smile brisk. Buongiorno. Cosa desidera? Sophie hesitated, then tried a phrase she'd practiced. Un caffè, per favor, e un cornetto. The waitress nodded, scribbling. Bene. Sophie's heart leapt. She'd used Italian and it worked. The coffee was strong, the cornetto flaky and sweet. As she ate, she watched passers-by. A street musician playing an accordion, a child chasing pigeons. She felt less like an outsider, more like part of the city's pulse. She paid, adding a tip, and the waitress said, Grazie. Buon giornata. Sophie repeated, Buon giornata, her voice steadier. Over the next few days, Sophie explored Florence, each meal a small victory. She tried a bustling trattoria, ordering gnocchi with pesto, and a quiet pizzeria, savoring a margherita pizza. Each time, her confidence grew. She learned to say senza gas for water to ask posso avere conto? For the bill. Her journal filled with notes. I'm not just eating. I'm learning to trust myself. One evening, Sophie decided to challenge herself further. She'd read about Ristorante La Luna, an upscale restaurant near the Duomo, known for its elegant ambiance and Tuscan cuisine. Reviews praised its osso buca and tiramisu, but the formality intimidated her. Can I do this? She wondered, dressing in her best black dress and brushing her auburn hair. As she pushed open the heavy door, warm light enveloped her. Crystal chandeliers gleamed, white tablecloths shimmered, and a single red rose adorned each table. The air smelled of rosemary and wine, but Sophie's stomach nodded. This is different. She stood by the entrance, her old fears resurfacing. A host in a tailored suit approached. Buonasera. Avete una prenotazione? Sophie swallowed. No table for one, please. He smiled. Via bene. Follow me. He led her to a small table by a window overlooking the glowing Duomo. Your waiter will come soon, he said, handing her a leather-bound menu. The menu was daunting Italian with sparse English translations, prices higher than the trattorias. Sophie studied it, settling on osso buco with polenta and a glass of Chianti. When the waiter arrived, she ordered with a calm she didn't fully feel. Osso buca con polenta e un bicchiere di Chianti, per favor. He nodded. Perfetto. Subito. Sophie exhaled, her hands on clenched. As she waited, a woman at a nearby table caught her eye. She was older, with silver hair and a warm smile, dining alone with a book. She noticed Sophie and leaned over. Traveling solo? She asked in accented English. Sophie nodded. Yes. From the U.S. The woman introduced herself as Elena, a retired teacher from Florence. You're brave to dine alone here, she said. It's not common, but it's special. They chatted and Elena invited Sophie to join her for dessert. Try the tiramisu, it's divine. Sophie hesitated, then agreed, moving to Elena's table. The tiramisu arrived, dusted with cocoa, and they shared it, laughing over stories of travel. Elena shared tales of her youth, including a trip to Rome where she learned to embrace solitude. You're finding your strength, she said, touching Sophie's hand. Keep going. Sophie smiled, feeling seen. When they parted, Elena gave her a red rose from the table. For courage, she said. The next day, Sophie visited a local market, inspired by Elena's warmth. She bought fresh bread and a small bouquet of roses for her hotel room, their scent reminding her of her growing confidence. At a gelateria, she ordered pistachio gelato in Italian, earning a grin from the server. Each interaction felt like a step forward, her voice steadier, her heart lighter. In her final days in Florence, Sophie received an email from her grandmother, Margaret, back in Colorado. Margaret, a retired librarian, had always encouraged Sophie's adventures. Sophie called her, sharing her restaurant experiences. You're blooming, Sophie. Margaret said. Like the roses in my garden, strong through any storm. Sophie smiled, promising to bring Margaret a rose from Italy. One evening, Sophie returned to Trattoria Il Sole, the first restaurant she'd braved. This time she walked in confidently, choosing a table without hesitation. She ordered pappardelle with wild boar ragout, chatting with the waiter about Florence's history. As she ate, she reflected on her journey. I came here afraid, but I've learned to speak, to connect, to be enough. A young couple at a nearby table asked if she was a local. Just visiting, she said, smiling. They invited her to join them for coffee, and she accepted. Their conversation flowing easily. Back in Colorado, Sophie carried her newfound courage. She organized a storytelling night for her students, sharing tales of her trip. She started a blog about solo travel, her posts resonating with readers who felt alone in new places. One evening, she visited Margaret, bringing a pressed rose from Florence. This is for you, Sophie said. Margaret hugged her. You've grown, my dear. Keep shining. Sophie's classroom became a place of bolder lessons, encouraging her students to try new things, to speak up, to trust themselves. She wrote in her journal, Florence taught me more than Italian or food. It taught me I'm enough just as I am. As she planned her next trip to Paris, she knew she'd carry Florence's lessons with her. Like a rose tucked close to her heart. To make the story longer, I've added detailed scenes to deepen Sophie's journey and the supporting characters. Roles. Sophie joined a Tuscan cooking class, learning to make fresh pasta. The instructor, a jovial chef named Marco, praised her efforts, saying, You have a natural touch. She laughed, rolling dough beside a German tourist named Hans, who shared his own solo travel stories. The experience, filled with flour and laughter, boosted her confidence to try new things, inspiring a journal entry about embracing the unknown. Mid-trip, Sophie received a letter from Margaret, mailed before she left Colorado. It described Margaret's own solo trip to London decades ago, where she dined alone and found independence. You're braver than you know, Margaret wrote, enclosing a sketch of a rose. Sophie kept the letter in her journal, reading it when doubts crept in, grounding her in her grandmother's wisdom. One afternoon, Sophie sat in Piazza della Signoria, sketching the statues and writing in her journal. A street vendor offered her a single rose, saying, For a brave traveler. She accepted, tucking it into her hair, and struck up a conversation with an Italian student, Lucia, who taught her new phrases. Their chat about art and travel inspired Sophie to visit the Uffizi Gallery, where she felt connected to Florence's history. At Florence's San Lorenzo market, Sophie practiced her Italian, bargaining for a leather journal and a bouquet of roses. The vendor, an older woman named Rosa, shared stories of her youth, encouraging Sophie to live boldly. The roses adorned her hotel room, their scent a reminder of her growing strength. And she wrote a blog post about the market's vibrant energy. Sophie climbed the Duomo's dome with a guided tour, meeting a Canadian traveler, Emma, who was also dining solo. They bonded over their shared fears, exchanging tips for navigating restaurants. At the top, overlooking Florence's rooftops, Sophie felt a surge of pride. She was conquering her fears, one step at a time. On her last night, Sophie dined at a rooftop restaurant, overlooking the Arno River. She ordered confidently bistecca alla Fiorentina and a glass of Brunello, chatting with the waiter about local wines. A nearby table of locals invited her to join their toast, celebrating her courage. She raised her glass, feeling fully part of Florence's warmth. Back home, Sophie's blog gained traction, with readers commenting, "Your story makes me want to travel alone." She responded to each, sharing Elena's and Margaret's advice. One reader, a young woman from Denver, met Sophie for coffee, saying her posts inspired her to book a solo trip. Sophie realized her journey was helping others, like roses blooming in a shared garden.